Okay, while our kids are going down, I want to encourage you to get your Bibles open. What? We're going to be in the Gospel of John this morning. It's two short verses, but Margaret, you going to stay with me? You're more than welcome. I'm going to use you as an illustration if you stay, though. I'm more than happy to have you. Okay, I think it's going to be page 1080 if you're picking up a Bible out there. If you are using an electronic device or you're with us virtually, I encourage you to use the New International Version simply because that's what I have, and it's good to have the same kind of page, the same wording on it. So, we are in John chapter 13. And I'll give you some more context in a minute, but let's just start the larger context, as I think this will be really helpful for us. 4 Gospels, right? The first, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, we call the Synoptic Gospels, the first 3. Synoptic, just the same word we use when we say synopsis. So being able to get an overview of the life, the ministry, the betrayal, the death, the resurrection of Jesus, right? Gospel of John is the 4th Gospel. It's different. You see it from the very beginning. And I think one way to present it is that Matthew, Mark, and Luke are really talking about Jesus here on earth, right? About how it starts out with genealogy, 2 of them. The other starts out with Jesus' baptism. It's all about this. The Gospel of John actually starts here in sort of this heavenly realm and then kind of descends down. And it makes it very, very fascinating and interesting, and it provides stuff for us that we don't get in the other Gospels. So, in the Gospel of John, for example, if you look at the very first chapter of the Gospel of John, you'll see that it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. All things were made through Him. Without Him, nothing was made that was made. In Him was life. It goes on and on. And that word is Greek word logos. It's actually talking about Jesus. So it goes to the beginning of Genesis, in the beginning when God created the heavens and the earth. And it says, now in the beginning was the Word. Jesus was there in the beginning. And the sense of this heavenly realm permeates sort of the eternal character of everything in this world, permeates the Gospel of John. And so even the stories that are shared or the miracles that happen. You remember in the Gospel of John, a little piece of trivia. Remember the first miracle in the Gospel of John? It's at a party, right? Turning the water into wine. Like Jesus loved to party in that way, right? So he turns the water into wine. Now here's what's happening in that. Jesus is, in essence, representing an Old Testament understanding of God as the bridegroom. And we see this throughout the prophets in the Old Testament, the sense that God serves as the bridegroom and we serve as the bride, very often unworthy in that. And so you'll see that he talks about the bridegroom a lot in the Gospel of John. Then he starts to talk more about something else that we find rooted in the tradition of the Old Testament, the role of a father, the blessing that comes from the role of the father. And so he talks about his father a lot. And he brings new meaning to it because it's this eternal understanding of God as Father. And then you'll see something really interesting happen as it plays out. He moves from, he includes, in addition to this bridegroom Old Testament understanding, and then this sort of Old Testament understanding of the Father's blessing, he starts to talk about friendship. And friendship for Jesus is fascinating because friendship seems to be the ultimate relationship. No greater love than this, than to lay down one's life for a friend, Jesus says. And so then he's now talking about God, not only as the bridegroom who comes, not only as the Father, but he's talking about this God as friend. And the call for us to have the same, it expands our borders, right? It makes it not the nuclear family image. It brings it into this broader perspective of all our friends who are loved and love this God. So it's really fascinating. I say that because when we get to this passage now in the 13th chapter, this is the last night of Jesus' earthly life. Right before these verses, Judas has left the table to go and betray Jesus. And then right after these verses, Peter says that he's going to follow Jesus even to death, but Jesus says to him, no, you won't. You'll deny me 3 times before the cock crows, right? So there's, in that midst of that betrayal, denial, come these words. John chapter 13, beginning with verse 34, Jesus said, a new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so much must you love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. That's the word of the Lord. So, the prior church I served, I can tell a lot of stories about prior churches. I don't tell many about you because, well, never mind. Okay, prior church I served, we had, and Valina will know this, Valina and I served in another church together as well. Valina will know this, we had a grammarian, right? We had a grammarian, a self-appointed grammarian, who when the service was over would come up with a sheet that would let me know how many split infinitives I had in my sermon and how many things were there and all. Now it might sound like that was really kind of intrusive or rude or whatever, but I absolutely loved it. Her name was Betsy Rule, and Betsy Rule loved me. And she just wanted to help. And the other thing that Betsy did was, she was the editor of our newsletter. And we had this huge, expansive newsletter back in the day, before all the world of all this we have now. And so she would go through, we'd all write the articles, and then she would go through with this red pen and just, boom, boom, boom. By the time it went out, it was perfect grammatically. Betsy hated the way I wrote. Well, I shouldn't say hated, but she greatly disliked the way I wrote because she could not stand exclamation points. And I would put an exclamation point about almost every sentence. I'd just put an exclamation point, an exclamation point. And she would come in and she would say over and over and over, she said, Jim, let your words mean what the words mean. You don't need to add to it. You don't need to exclaim it. You don't let your words mean what the words mean. And she would go over and over and over with that. I have thought about Betsy in so many different ways, and all of them loving, and all of them in a great help to me. But that phrase, let your words mean what the words mean, is something that has intrigued me. Because what are words? In our preschool, we have kids from infant up through kindergarten. And every year in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 classes, we will have a biter, right? A kid that bites. And it is always fascinating to see how that plays out because nobody wants their kid to be bitten, right? But nobody especially wants to have the kid that is the biter. They are convinced, especially if it's their first child, they are convinced that that child is going to be in prison by the time they're 16 because they're biting now. And it all plays out. They go to the pediatrician, don't they, Monica? They come and see you. My kid's a biter. What am I going to do? And we all know this, right? I mean, we know. All the studies tell us, common sense tells us that kids bite when they don't really have the words to be able to get out how they feel. Now, I'm going to leave that with you for a while. You got any biters in your life? I'm serious. I mean, think about that for a moment. Not being able to get out how we feel or get out our thoughts, not to be able to put the words to it, and so we just... Wittgenstein, 20th century philosopher, said, the limits of my language determine the boundaries of my world. The limits of my language determine the boundaries of my world. For Wittgenstein, I think he was absolutely right that words are formed by a shared experience, something that we have in common, that we all see, and then we can attach a word to it. And so words are what defines community, it defines society, it defines culture, it defines who we are. If we don't have words, we really don't have a way of being able to fulfill the depth of human experience, right? To be able to share that with each other. Now, I say that because I do think it's very important to let our words mean what the words mean. And when I look at the world today, I think in our culture, I think there are some really challenging words to quite grasp and understand, for us to have a common understanding of what they mean. But I honestly don't know that there is a word that is more challenged than the word love. what does love mean? We have a lot of sayings. We talk about I love ice cream, I love chocolate, I love my spouse, I love my parents. Same word. And then we have these phrases like love is love. Now Betsy would say that's a circular logical error in that a word can't define itself, but it comes up with a clever kind of phrasing to it. But what is love? I think our culture, in our society in the U.S., I think we use the word love a lot more than is used in many, many other cultures. Maybe good, maybe bad, I don't know. I just think we... But I reflect on it, and I go back to the Greek, and I realize that, I know that's the nerd thing to do. Like, you know how many words there are for love in Greek? 7. 7 words. We take all 7 of those things, and we put it into one word. In the Bible, how many words there are for love? 2. Sort of 3, but really 2. The 2 words that are used in the New Testament in particular for love are this: the word philos, which is a brotherly love. So philos is love, adelphoi is brother, Philadelphia is the city of brotherly love. Not that it lives into that very well, very often, but the city of brotherly love, so philos, so the love of a brother, And then the other word that's used, overwhelmingly more than this word, philos, is agape, or agape, or agape, however we want to pronounce it. But this agape word is the word that is always used about God. And it's used overwhelmingly more often than the other in every context, but when it comes to God, this word agape is always used. And that word in the Greek is more than what we think the word love is. It's a love that is a love that desires nothing but the best for someone else with no expectation of anything in return. To be able to love and to love so much that we don't desire, we don't want anything in return. If we get it, it's great, but we love. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, right? John, love. This word for love is the word that's being used in this passage. A new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you. For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten son. And I think it's fascinating because that word for love, we really don't use much anymore. I think in our culture today, Rebecca McLaughlin, who I really like her writing, the Women's Potluck are using a book of hers, a contemporary Christian writer. She says, in a culture that believes sexual love is the peak of human intimacy, followed closely by parental love, it's easy to believe that the nuclear family is the locus for all lasting love. But Jesus says no greater love than this is to give your life for a friend. Friendship is as deep or deeper than the love that we know in our relationships, in marriage between a man and a woman, and the sexual intimacy of that. It is deeper than the love even that we find in our families, our nuclear families, with our children and with our parents. This friendship that is a friendship of love. So, the thing I realized when I read the Gospel of John, I had 2 long waits in waiting rooms this week, a couple of hours each, well, sort of. And so I just had a lot of time. After you do your email, what do? I read the Bible. So I've got my phone, and I'm reading the Gospel of John. And over the course of the week, I've read it probably 6 or 7 times, just from beginning to end. It's 21 chapters. It's not that long. And I've come to recognize that in the midst of this gospel is something more than just this one phrase, a new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you. But the entire gospel is really about this definition of love. When Jesus says, I am, that's the phrase that God used at the burning bush with Moses. I am who I am, Yahweh, right? The whole word Yahweh means I am. So when Jesus says throughout, I am 7 times, and then throughout he continually uses this phrase, I am, even in conversations, Jesus is very clearly claiming this godship. And he's claiming this love. And the thing that I come to realize in the Gospel of John is this, is that love is not an aspect of God. So bear with me on this, because it's kind of nerdy, but it's really good, I think. Love is not an aspect of God. It's not like God is loving and God is also just. God is also merciful. God is also compassionate. I don't think that's right. I think that 1 John chapter 4 says God is love. And I think the Gospel of John embodies this, that God is love. It's not an aspect of God, it's the essence of love. So if God is love, then justice and mercy and forgiveness and all of that is part of the understanding of love. So it's not like there's justice and there's love, or there's mercy and there's love, or there's compassion or there's love. It's that there's love, and love is just. And love is truth and pursues truth. And love is gracious, and love is forgiving, and love is compassionate. So then I got to thinking, why don't I read the Gospel of John and see what this love does? If Jesus is God, and if God is love, perhaps the trick is to be able to, or the key is to be able to go into the Gospel and say, what does love do? So I started looking at it from that perspective. And I found it fascinating to me. These weren't stories I hadn't read before. I've read the Bible, but I was fascinated when I read it. How many times and how much time Jesus spent with outsiders. He spent so much time with folks that didn't believe what he believed or think what he thought or believe, or that actually those who wanted him dead, the good legalistic Jewish folks of Jesus' time, that they actually called him a Samaritan. He spent time there in Samaria with Samaritans. Jesus spent a lot of time with women. A lot of men spent a lot of time with women. But here's the fascinating thing. At the time of Jesus, it would never, a Jewish man and a Jewish woman who weren't in the same family would never have any contact or conversation with each other. I've actually been, the last number of years, I've been in hotels in Jerusalem, Jewish hotels in Jerusalem, where there was an elevator shaft for women and an elevator shaft for men. I mean, still to this day, there's this sort of need, or in much of the Orthodox and ultra-Orthodox Jewish tradition, women and men are separated in worship. These things. Now, that was overwhelmingly the time of Jesus. So Jesus spending time with women is not like, he just hung out with women or wanted to empower women. He was actually challenging everything in the system. And he hung out with women that, like the woman that was caught in adultery. That's in the Gospel of John. Or the woman that's at the well, the 4th chapter of John. She's a Samaritan woman, so she's a Samaritan, she's a woman. There she is at the well. And these are not women that are noted for great moral character understood by their culture and society. You remember the woman at the well, she'd been married a number of times, and the man she's with now is not her husband. Jesus knows that, and he says that to her. But he speaks to her in such a way that by the time that conversation is over, she goes back to her village and she begins to share about who Jesus is. She becomes the first evangelist of Jesus as the Son of God before the disciples even thought about that. I was fascinated by the conflict that Jesus caused. He goes into the temple and just tears it apart, whip and all that kind of stuff, like gosh. Or so much conflict with the religious leaders that very early they want to plot to kill him. It's fascinating to me to read the Gospel of John and realize that his love is so deep and true and encompassing that it is so hard that many of the disciples actually leave him. Many do. To the point that Jesus says to the small group of disciples, like the 12, and says, would you want to leave me too? See, so much of this love is so So much deeper, so much more profound than the love that we often think about. Well, the love of God, he brings the little children up. And I was overwhelmed by the way betrayal is played and denial, and how lonely Jesus is in the Gospel of John at the end when everyone has left him and he cries out and prays to his Father. And yet his eyes always seem to stay on his Father. So if God is love, if Jesus is God, this is love, truth. Speaking a truth that would, you see, love is not acceptance. That's cheap and easy. Love is truth. Expanding borders. Being willing to confuse the world with a mission from God. To let people love. To be of another kingdom. To see the eternal in all. To give up the world, even unto death. All of that is love. And then I think about the end of the Gospel of John. So you can do this a little bit later. You don't have to flip to it right now. John's 21 chapters. You read the end of the 20th chapter, you think it's over. It wraps it all up. It's done. But then there's another chapter. Just kind of added on. It's after Jesus has, been raised and kind of on away. The disciples go back to work. Peter and some of the others, they go fishing. And they fish all night. You remember the story, right? They fish all night, they don't catch anything. And they're coming back into shore. They don't have any catch, there's no money coming. And there's somebody on the shore that's cooking fish for breakfast. Because they'd been out all night. And the guy that's cooking fish says to him, well, hey, throw your nets on the other side. And they say, hey, we're fishermen. We know what we're doing. So throw your nets out. And they catch so many fish, the boat almost starts to tip over. Peter recognizes, hey, I think that's Jesus. And so he jumps out of the boat and kind of does Peter's thing, and he comes up to Jesus. And sure enough, it's Jesus. It's the risen Lord. He's cooking breakfast for these guys. And they sit down and start to have breakfast. It's a simple story. And then Jesus looks at Peter. You remember Peter who denied him 3 times. The one who said, I'll never leave you. I'll die with you. I'll do all of that. He denied him. He said, I don't know him. I don't know him. I don't know him. He says to Peter, Peter, do you love me? He uses the word agape. Do you really love me the way I love you? And Peter says, Lord, you know I love you. You know I philos you. I kind of love you. Like I was in Philadelphia love, right? We together? Jesus says, feed my sheep. A little bit later, Jesus says, Peter, do you love me? Agape. Love me? Truly love me like I love you? Peter says, Lord, you know I love you like a brother, like Philadelphia. Tend my lambs. And then a little bit later, Jesus says to him, Peter, do you love me? Do you love me like Philadelphia? Jesus changes the word. He doesn't say agape the 3rd time. He says philos. And Peter says, Lord, you know I love you like Philadelphia. I'm not beating up on Philadelphia in any way, please. I'm just trying to get the point across this word, right? I'm really not. I'm trying to get the point across. You know what happens in that? 2 things. First off, is Jesus accepts whatever Peter can give him. Peter doesn't have to have that depth of love and dependence and reliance on Jesus. Jesus says, I will take what you can give me, and we'll work with that. Oh, that's profound. Oh, that gives me hope. But here's the other thing. Peter, do you love me? Tend my sheep, feed my lambs, tend my sheep. When Jesus forgives Peter, he not only forgives him, he gives him something to do. He restores him into life and ministry with him. Now bear with me. You see, this is love. One thing is to forgive, and I'm in a place in my life, I've been in a place in my life, I'm not there right now so much, but I've been in places in my life where I knew I needed to forgive. I needed to forgive because it was eating me up. Are we together? You know, it's that thing that just eats us up. I got to forgive. And there's something about being able to do that and forgive. You know, because it makes me better. It changes me. It's not about the other person, or the other thing, it's about me. But that's not the forgiveness of God. The forgiveness of God is not simply to say, okay, now you can forgive so that it's better for you. But you forgive. See, God forgives us and he gives us something to do. He restores us in relationship. And this is love. This is love for us in this world. So what's it mean for us? I think if we go back and we really believe that the Gospel of John is true and all that we read in Scripture is that love is not an aspect of God, but it is the very essence, the very definition of God. I am, Jesus would say, Yahweh, agape, love. Then we got to start asking ourselves, what are my boundaries? I read a study not long ago, you know, and I'm assuming this study's right. We are 5 times more likely in our country to marry outside of our faith than outside of our religious party. We're 5 times more likely to marry a Christian to marry a Muslim than a Democrat to marry a Republican. No, I'm not saying that it's wrong for Democrats to marry Democrats or Republicans. Don't put something in me that's not there, but I think that's fascinating to me. Because I think the boundaries are being drawn now that are not boundaries that we've really set ourselves, but they've just been set for us. And the things that separate us. And the inability for us when we're separated, when we're separated by ethnicities and race and cultural backgrounds and educations and all these kinds of things, when we're separated by that, I think we miss the opportunity and the privilege. I think we miss love. I mean, do we live in such a way, the love of God, that others might look at us and call us a Samaritan? Are we loving in such a way that love is going to be misunderstood and we may be betrayed and persecuted and lonely and ultimately we may die? But we die for love. Is our love a love that is a truth? And are we forgiving in a way that's not just about me, but about my overwhelming desire for that person, that thing, that event to be restored itself? Do we see the eternal in everything? Every encounter, every interaction. So I think today, maybe it's something as simple as this. I think this is a start. What if we took 2 things in our lives? 2 hurts, 2 frustrations, 2 things. Stuff, right? What if we took 2 things, just 2, and we chose to see the eternal in it? Not what happened to me only, not how hard, but to see the eternal in it. Maybe that's the love that the world needs. I think it is. And maybe we should let our words mean what the words mean. A new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. And what if that love was the true love of God, or as best we can reach? There's no greater love than this, than to lay down one's life for a friend. What if the love that I hold for my family and my kids and my grandkids and in our marriages and all those things, what if all of that love and even more was the love we shared with this world? Of course we'd be rejected. Of course we'd be persecuted. But of course, Jesus would be made known and life would be saved. Two things. Simply to choose to see the eternal in it. Amen.